Welcome to the Becoming Years. Allow me to welcome the woman behind the voice and journey. Your host, Alina Wilson, is a mother, entrepreneur, aesthetics, wellness clinic owner, and author of Thoughtful Aging, restoring honor to the aging process with intention and grace. Her becoming years have been shaped by courage, reinvention, and wisdom. And the truth is, she is still becoming. Because the becoming years are not about who you were, they're about who you choose to become. No matter your age or your story, we are all still becoming. Alina, the mic is yours.
Welcome to the Becoming Years podcast. I am here today with Brianna Bass. She's a therapist, a board-certified clinical sexologist, and a former corporate executive, like so many of us. She helps high-functioning and emotionally intelligent individuals and couples break patterns, heal relationships, and transform their lives through direct, no BS therapy. That's the thing that I loved about her, is that she was straight up, let's cut through the BS and let's get down to it. And you all know I love to do that. Her work bridges emotional insight with real-world impact, tackling everything from modern dating and burnout to intimacy, ambition, and identity.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, you and I beforehand, we talked about a little agenda that we wanted to maybe discuss in this information to bring to listeners today. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here and to be learning with you. So first of all, just thank you for your time. Thank you for making this happen with me. And a lot of the women that I talk to are these high-powered, if you will, or like these corporate women who are holding things together through work and family and taking care of aging parents and doing all these things. And a lot of language right now is about self-care. Take care of yourself, do this, do that. But how do we find the time? And what does that even look like? What is this high-functioning codependency that I've been hearing about? How does emotional shutdown play a role? Can you lead us through some of these things?
Yeah, this is a complex topic, and there's a few different things in there. So tell me if I don't hit them all, or we might need to kind of break it down. But yeah, I hear you. You've got, these women that are beautiful women, and they've had success on paper, and I'm confident in a number of other ways, but they're what you're referencing is this like internal undernourishment, right, in high achieving women. And then yes, there's been a huge self-care movement, and we see that everywhere. We hear that talked about. I will say, very unpopular opinion, I do not think it's about finding the time. I will go with where there's a will, there's a way on this one. The time is not going to create itself. Neither did your ability to achieve all those to-do list items, juggle the kids, juggle the work, get the report done, dinner on the table, or DoorDash it, or whatever your life looks like. You figured all of that out. So for self-care, time is not coming. No one's coming knocking to save you or to rescue you. So you need to treat it the same way that you are all the other plates that you have spinning. Only hopefully it makes your spin a little bit softer, a little bit more tolerable, right? Because yes, we do eventually burn out, but above all with burning out, right, we get into sort of a survival mode. And in that survival mode, it hurts our ability to form deep connections with people, and ourselves are included in that. So that's when we wake up and start to feel like the quality of life has just dwindled, or no one really, really knows me. They see me, to an extent, or the airs that I put on, how I perform, or they know me in various sort of specific environments, but they don't really know me. So this undernourishment in women specifically, due to high functioning or being so high achieving, has real world implications and cost. And honestly, if you're one of those women, you already know all of this anyways, right? Because you're probably listening to a self-help book or a podcast or something regardless. And, it's so funny how in this effort of trying to improve things, we just add onto our list these things that I think have gotten really buzzy, like for example, a meditation, or doing this one trick, doing this one task, or throwing something at the specific thing, and then we don't see results, or perhaps we can't sustain that new habit, and now we've just added a failure onto our list. So when I talk about the no self-help fluff, I am not here for the do this one trick. And I'm a little bit against all that media that's so interesting right now and gets a ton of clicks, but isn't really serving our women, because that's not how actual growth happens. I wish it was that easy. I wish it was one click one trick or something like that, but it's totally not. And of course, I'm going to encourage everybody to go to therapy. I don't know if anything can quite compete with that. If you're using AI or you've got a podcast in your ear or something, those are awesome things to do. Don't stop. But I don't know if anything quite carries the weight and impact that truly sitting down human to human and talking about yourself from a cognitive offload standpoint, from a confessional standpoint, from a here's my past, here's the load I'm carrying standpoint. And then finally, kind of the fourth pillar that you can achieve specifically and only in therapy is, what is the woman that I want to look like, behave like? Who is she? And how am I sitting before you today in contrast to her? Let's identify that, map that out, and then build a plan together on how we get to her, right? You were probably her at one point also. You probably feel like you were, but have lost yourself. That gives us a great framework and groundwork. We've already got some of the answers. So, of course, I'm going to encourage, therapy with it. But yeah, you asked a couple of things in there that I don't think I got to, but yeah.
No, you did. And here's how I know that you're getting to them, because I'm sitting here in my chair and I'm listening to you talk, and I can feel my body just sinking into this chair and just having you speak these words to me, because you are absolutely spot on. The phrase that you just used that really caught my attention, that resonates with me, is undernourishment. And it occurs to me just in this conversation with you that, can we please just replace this word self-care, or just set that down and leave that alone and not do that anymore, and just really look at it from a nourishment standpoint? And here's why I think that is so important, because when you're nourishing something, you are helping it grow. When you're caring for something, you're giving yourself to it, but you don't necessarily always get a benefit from it. When you're nourishing something, okay, that means it's intentional, it does require effort, and it's for a purpose that is long-term and sustainable. When something's growing, it's growing. When you're just caring for it, it's more of a third-party remote idea. So I'm totally using that now. I'm letting go of self-care and I'm using nourishment. But let's talk a little bit about what you brought up with respect to the emotional well-being of women in these positions, and how do we address that deeper connection first with self so that we can bring that to others?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I have never thought of that before about me using that word, so I'll use it more. You're right. When I think of care, I think of like using a body scrub or something. I think of being in the shower and
Exactly.
like
Yes,
one
bubble
one that
bath.
yeah, one that like is expensive that I usually don't open very often, or smells like vanilla or something. And yeah, nourishment feels different. You're right. You're right. I envision something that seems to feed something in which there would be a growth path after that, some sort of change. It feels like in different kind of investment, like it has tenure or time or
Yes,
something like that with it, versus the care being like this moment of reprieve of a wine in the bath for 30 minutes, and that's all awesome too. Hopefully you can
right.
do both. But yeah, you're right. That is a good point. As I was hearing you say the words I had said to you back, it did make my mind sort of paint a very different picture when I thought of the word, self nourishment or just nourishment. And you're right. I do use language like being underfed and things like that, especially when I'm working with couples. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I never thought about that myself.
Well, I love that we came to that together, and I think that it's just a whole nother conversation to have, about the intention of aging. And I know I've said to women often who come in here to the clinic and they feel like they are losing relevance, which is something that you just spoke of, where who am I and how did I get here and what am I doing and where do I go next? And there's this idea that we've lost relevance, and that's because the world around us changes. You walk into a restaurant and the waiter no longer jumps up to serve you, and you obviously are going to look internally as to the why of that. But I encourage women in my practice here to not think of it as aging out of relevance, but aging into perspective. So how can we shift perspective on this process that we're approaching as women in midlife, or even younger women, because I know we go through transitions in our 20s and 30s as well? What are some of the things that we can do that help us reframe our perspective on the process that we're going through? Even when it comes to just the intimacy that we have with ourselves and with others. And I know you mentioned that you have an 8 pillars of intimacy. Would this be a good time to bring that up?
Well, the 8 pillars of intimacy are specifically with a partner. So for those that are for those that are in a relationship, they're excellent. I love them because they're very concrete. Again, with the self-help like thing, they don't feel like that. They're very tangible. I like that they're free from like sort of a time and actual free cost standpoint. So I really like that about them. And especially for men, right? They're like, okay, I have these 8 things. All right. She gave me an example or 2 of these. I can go fix that. I can go implement that. So that's why I love them. So I do think they're great to talk about, but no, not totally for what you're referencing. And I felt myself just get so heavy as you were talking about, the women that you speak with and them feeling like they've aged and are no longer relevant, and that their perceived market worth or their value is no longer what it used to be, and they don't know where to go with that. And perhaps before the emphasis was on physical appearance, vitality, working, backbreaking work. And here they are not necessarily participating in those things with the same type of emphasis. And now they're going, oh my gosh, what do I do? Is life over for me? They're feeling depressed, horrible about themselves, all those things. So it breaks my heart to hear that. And I know exactly what you're talking about from a personal standpoint, and then also, of course, women in my life. And, so what do we do there, and how do we shift it? One, I think, is you start building now. So even if you are, let's say, in your 20s or your 30s, you can start creating a life that is one that will sustain you past aging or sans aging. So what I mean by that is looking at your life. I talk a lot about the pie of life also, which is just a way to break out your life into a number of categories, which is platonic relationships, romantic relationships, familial, your career, right, hobbies, interests, things like that. And we want to color in all these slices. So if we have done something like focused exclusively on our career and really doubled and tripled down on that, yes, bad news that exactly what you're saying is going to happen. We are going to wake up, and that aging is going to feel very different because we have built our life and our identity around something that isn't infinite. It is finite. It does have rules and regulations and societal norms that say, hey, you no longer have the relevance here that you had, man or woman. And then same with building your life, let's say, around a partner. You might wake up, even if that relationship is still strong, but you've got that emptiness inside of you. So we want to color in all of these different pie slices and make sure that there's investment equitably distributed so that we can year over year age gracefully, beautifully, and in a way that we feel incredibly secure, powerful, and confident. A big piece to think about is your platonic relationships, right? So girlfriends. What does it look like with your girlfriends? And I know that's easier said than done. In our world today, it is getting so hard to have platonic friendships. I know, and it becomes a quality over quantity thing, especially as we age. We get down to like 2, and we're like, oh God. So I'm with you. I get it. But we do want to try to get some platonic friendships going. We all know the feeling after an incredible brunch with a girlfriend or a glass of wine on their couch or just a phone call. You literally will feel higher afterwards. So I want you to think about these categories of life and take a self inventory of, where am I sparse? Where do I need to invest in, right? I can think of, my mom retiring, and I can think of an uncle that retired, and they both had the same outcome, which was they felt like crap. They felt like crap afterwards. They thought it was everything they'd ever worked towards and for. And then 6 months into it, a year into it, it was like, you know what? I'm bored and I don't feel a sense of purpose like I used to have. They had to go back to some of these kind of categories that I'm talking about and start to reinvest. So my direct advice would be in our 20s, in our 30s, start to look into that if you can get as early into it as then, so that as time goes on, we've built that out. And if you feel like you're experiencing today some voids in these other areas, you know, start now with doing that. But that is what it quite literally is, that fights the feeling of emptiness, loneliness, isolation, um, low self-identity, and low self-worth.
I hear you saying that finding a purpose can help meet that need for addressing that loneliness that we get when we wake up and we feel like, where am I and who am I and how did I get here? And I'm wondering, and I know how soul nourishing it is to spend time with girlfriends. I just did it this last Saturday. Had a lovely brunch and a little wine tour with some girlfriends. And every time I do that, I leave feeling like a stronger woman, a supported person, somebody who has a place in this world and has a purpose amongst my friends, the conversations that we have. And we're talking about everything. We're talking about family and sex, and we're talking about boys, and we're talking about other girlfriend relationships and how to make them better and what can we do. And for women who don't have that, I'm always such a big advocate for that. What is it, do you think, that blocks us from being able to step forward and make ourselves a priority and seek that transparency and vulnerability with other women?
There's a few things that can block you from that, but if we're talking specifically about kind of high functioning, high achieving women, right? And this can be, to be clear, we've got someone who's a CEO or an attorney, and then we have someone who is, a stay-at-home mom. It applies to all those sort of shapes and sizes. Let me divide it for you. So ultimately, it's someone who, right, is showing up as ultra reliable. This person is very reliable. They have leadership qualities, right? They're mature, things like that, right? This is somebody who we're considering as high functioning. They've got patterns that society is gonna quietly sort of celebrate, right? As they are so strong. She is type A. And they're often the ones that we don't worry about so much because, oh, that girlfriend, she has it together. She's really, really responsible. But the problem with some of these beautiful, beautiful qualities that get the kids fed and the to-do list done and the chores done and makes it to all of the appointments are not necessarily the things that contribute to having intimacy. And I mean intimacy with girlfriends, platonic and romantic partnerships, honestly, even intimacy with yourself, because that's even a thing. So when we're talking about forming those connections with people, and you can tell the difference in when they feel sort of superficial or they feel like there's a bond there. Well, the bond piece is built on vulnerability and, right, transparency. Think of it critically as, or concretely as, even maybe some self-deprecation. Let's say if you were having a conversation like that, versus you wanted this person to be very impressed with you. So to her, you're maybe going to speak about your accolades or, something that you just purchased, or, how your husband is doing with XYZ, right? And you might be matching their energy. It might be on you to really test this out and to show up and say something self-deprecating, or to open up yourself with a little dash of vulnerability. You can still play it very safe, right? But what would it be like to say, recently was, at the grocery store, and I had this moment where this guy ran into me with his cart, and I caught myself, thinking, I told myself, like, is this Is this 50? Is this, am I, whatever? Bounce that off of a girlfriend, right? Imagine saying that. Very light still, and that someone would probably latch onto that. Oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about. The other day, XYZ, right? So it doesn't have to be some complex, fancy, big thing. And if someone isn't latching onto stuff like that, well, we at least know maybe not to pursue that as one of our people. So the vulnerability, the just sharing the kind of little nuggets about what the world really is like behind your personal curtain, allowing someone in. We have fears around that, and they're totally understandable, especially if we come from any kind of corporate workspace. Those are going to be deep seated, right? The things rewarded there, reliability, lack of vulnerability, having a strong armor, being hyper efficient, all of that is going to be deep seated in us as the things that we need in order to be liked, valued, appreciated, and respected. So it's hard to kind of kick that to the curb.
But that becomes then a block for intimacy. So the performance that's required in a corporate or a leadership role becomes a block to intimacy from a personal standpoint. How does that translate into our intimate relationships with our partners?
Well, this is one I talk about a lot. This one is kind of a scary one. Okay, so because what I think you're alluding to, but I'm not totally sure, is oh man, especially in my couples, I talk about the overfunctioner versus underfunctioner, because the women that I meet with that say, he said he'd take the trash out, he didn't, I had to remind him again, or he took the kids to soccer but left their bag at home, or an example that I'll always give everybody is you've got a birthday party coming around, right? And so you have sent the invitations, planned it, you've picked out cake, balloons, right? You assign him like one thing. And then you feel like it's inching nearer to this birthday party and he still has not gotten that cake. And so crap, now he's going to create a whole litany of issues that would have been avoided. So you're just going to call the cake in. You're just going to handle it. You're just going to do it. You're just going to go swing in and pick it up and whatever. Everybody wins. It's lighter on you to deal with, like, I don't want any aftermath here. I just need things to go smooth, right? That's an example that I'll give people so they can start to identify with the underfunctioner, overfunctioner dynamic in relationships. So when we are high functioning, we often find ourselves in that rut. So if any of that sounds familiar to you, yeah, it's something, one, that's very fixable, but it's a byproduct of you wanting to control uncertainty. That's all. You just very beautifully want to control uncertainty by being hyper responsible, by being on top of it. If I anticipate and manage everything, if I hold everything together, then maybe nothing will fall apart, right? It's a very elegant defense, very elegant defense. Makes you look great, probably makes you feel good, talk about purpose, right? But the issue is that makes mutuality in a relationship incredibly difficult. So that's when you find yourself being resentful of the partner. You find yourself feeling lonely and burnt out, right? So you're the one that everyone trusts and everyone can rely on, right? You remember everything, you plan everything, but if you can't experience mutuality with your partner in some of these regards, that's not going to go well, right? And through doing this over time, you will actually stop the opportunity of discovering what your partner would actually do if they were ever given the system or space to show up and to manage whatever it is that needed to be managed. The other thing with this dynamic is that it gets worse over time. So the further we start into it, the more, I'm sorry, after we start into it, the further time goes on, we actually don't go closer together in this. The underfunctioner further underfunctions and the overfunctioner further overfunctions. So you'll feel very alone in this partnership. But as the overfunctioner, you have often built the very conditions that are creating that partnership from maturing in the way that you keep complaining about or knocking on the door about, right? I wish you would do this, or he's lazy, or he's not catching me here. Doesn't he see how stressed I am? So I will have to meet with those couples and we will have to start to break this down. And I will have to challenge you to not overfunction. Let him get the cake. Does that mean that it's probably not the right color? Does that mean that it was probably at the last minute, which could have been avoided? Yeah, it does. But that's kind of how we start to break this.
My blood pressure is going up just thinking about doing that right now, because I'm remembering in my marriage, it was just so much easier for me to just take out the garbage myself rather than ask it to be done, because it was not done. And so for me, it was easier for me to just do it myself than to continue to build resentment and frustration. And then that became a pattern and a way of life for me. But how do we find our way back to the middle without losing our damn minds, Like, is there a way to do that?
Yeah, that is, I totally understand what you're talking about, and I'm sure everyone listening can identify. You're either in the relationship currently, or you have been at some point in the past where you're like, yeah,
Right.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
about that cake and how that cake would be a disaster, and right, it would cause such a headache, and so yeah, you're like, it was just easier that I did it myself, and right, I don't want to ask. By asking, I know that's going to bother me to ask, and I shouldn't have to remind them. I'm anticipating their needs. I know what it takes for us to keep the ship sailing. Why can't they? And the internalized message often that comes with this is the whole where there's a will, there's a way, specifically in regards to care from the partner. So what I mean by that is often you will internalize, if they loved me enough, they just would. If they loved me enough, he just would. It's not that hard. This takes 5 minutes or this takes 20 minutes. Yes.
Unspoken expectation, then? Is that what we're talking about?
No, because in your example, right, with the trash, that sounds like that was a spoken expectation, or with the cake, right? That
Yeah,
is a spoken
it
expectation,
actually
right?
was.
Yeah, yeah. And so totally unspoken expectations, yes, absolutely. That's a whole other thing. And that's really great to talk about and tackle, and to bring those things, into the light, and really become verbal about what you need and what you want. And I help people with figuring out how to deliver those types of messages. Sometimes you've been in dynamics so long that you don't even know anymore how to communicate. Or if you identify with this, you feel like everything you say falls on deaf ears. They see me as a complainer, they see me as a nag or something like that, right? But yeah, so what were we talking about? Oh, I have something on this actually. So you were asking about how do they switch from this, right? So other than my awful news of stop functioning as much, let them get the cake. The other thing would be, this is a little deep, a little abstract, a little woo-woo, but the real shift, if you wanted to start on this change, the real shift is grieving the identity built around the one who carries it all, right? I want you to think about grieving the identity being built around the one who carries it all.
Break that down for
Because,
me, though. Are you talking about me as grieving the identity that I hold for myself as the one who carries it all?
yes, so, there's always exceptions to everything, but ultimately, the pitch I'm making, some tough love, is that you are getting something out of this. You are getting something out of it, being the one that carries it all, being the one who has everything together, who can keep all the plates spinning, who is brilliant at planning that party, right? So I would want to invite you and to encourage you to start to grieve that, the identity built around being the one who carries it all. Because for many people, right, this over functioning is not just a habit. It is literally your worth. It's your identity. It's probably how you describe yourself to others, how you maybe would think about yourself and internally. It's probably how you learned, right? This is how I earn love. This is how I earn predictability. I talked earlier about how, often hyper responsibility is this avoidance of uncertainty. Uncertainty sucks. That's where risk lies, and what have you. So that's actually a first step. I know it's a little abstract on that one, but I do wholeheartedly believe in it. And I'm coming from a place of I'm empirically speaking as well, for what it's worth. I myself have been in a partnership where I felt like I was the glue, and I kept all the plates spinning, and I didn't feel like it was equitable, and I had to go through these same exercises myself.
Do you think that high functioning, the way that we do, is a defense mechanism against feeling?
Sure, I think that the high functioning is well, it keeps feelings at bay because we don't have the mental capacity or the space to really process them or to lean in, right? If we're high functioning, meaning we're busy and we have a heavy to-do list, That's very distracting. It is literally distracting. It's literally taking up your time and your energy. It's even giving you conversation points with yourself and with others or with your partner, right? You can talk about logistics or kids or things like that. If you catch yourself, driving with a podcast on or driving with music on or making a phone call, or if you went on a walk, would you be able to do that in silence? Can you take a shower or a bath in silence? All these things. If some of that feels a little bit uncomfortable for you, that's a really tangible kind of concrete signal of like, hey, my functioning is very distracting, and specifically in regard to me avoiding leaning into how I really feel about things. Functioners, right? I get it, because this is what you probably think, what would happen if you just stopped and leaned into all these feelings? And if you just really thought about how sick you were of your partner's behavior in these ways, or that you had to take the trash out and because you didn't want to ask, you'd be going, well, Brianna, I don't have time for that. But what am I going to do with all that? I would feel awful. I would feel like crap. I'd feel sad. I'd feel lonely. I can't afford to lean into all of that. That's just going to slow me down. No one wins. I just lose in that equation. So yeah, I get it. It feels like we're just creating a problem that already exists, but you've learned how to manage and survive with it. But I would disagree with you vehemently. Ironically, counterintuitively, leaning into the feelings, the sadness, the grief, the pain, the loneliness, the exhaustion, actually makes it smaller. But it sounds like that wouldn't be the case. But that's actually how the brain works. So we do want to pause and think about our real circumstances. I said earlier, right? Take inventory of where these chips have fallen. And then, kind of start to go from there.
So leaning into a feeling can feel really overwhelming and really heavy for someone who's not used to doing that. Is there any advice that you can give on how to compartmentalize that, or is compartmentalization a tool to use? Or do you just plan? Because it's not like you can just say, wake up Saturday morning and, oh, it's 9 a.m. I've got it scheduled to feel things today. Today I'm going to feel things. Like, you can't do that, really, can you?
It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. So some of the stuff you might not even know that you're doing it. But especially if you've been performing for so long, you won't know how to be becoming, how to be authentically you. It will feel clunky. It will feel unnatural. Kind of a litmus test on that is, if I were to ask you, who really, knows you, who really sees you. And if you would have a hard time coming up with more than one person, or perhaps anyone at all, right? That right there is indicative that we've been performing. When we think about that, that's a good start on knowing that we need to slow down and try to get in touch with some of these actual authentic feelings by going to therapy, I don't know, using AI, any number of things, right? Listening to a podcast that stimulates your mind, such as this type of conversation around the subject itself. But yeah, no, it's not something that I wake up and go, I'm going to feel sad today, or I'm going to feel angry, or I'm going to feel, certainly not. Where it starts is showing up authentically, right? So if we had a partner, let's say, and they said, how was the day? How did your meeting go? That, because you've been talking about it all week, that you had this meeting coming up, and you said, oh, the meeting was good, and it was fine, and yeah, I think they'll go forward with this big contract. Very normal, very reasonable, appropriate answer, right? What I would want you to do instead is tell the truth about what the experience was like for you firsthand. So the meeting went well. As I was walking in, I was really nervous about, the pricing. I thought it was going to be something that they scoffed at, and then I'd have to, manage that live in the moment, and it didn't end up coming up, so I was okay. But the whole time I was on edge about that happening. I just made that up off the cuff, but you get the point. Those were completely different answers.
Intimacy. Completely different take on intimacy and connection and communication and transparency and vulnerability, and all of the things that deep, genuine connection requires are all of those elements to move beyond the superficial and into something more meaningful. And I know that we all want meaningful connections in our lives. We're human beings. We're designed that way, to have meaningful connections. But we live in a society that continues to trade the illusion of connectivity for community, and we think that just, scratching the surface is good enough because we have a society built around scratching the surface. But I guess, based on what you're saying here, then the call is for people and for women who genuinely desire deeper connection to do something different than they've done before. And I know that when I talk to women about dating, because this comes up a lot because we're in our 50s and 40s and 60s or whatever, and my advice to them is to not overcomplicate it, to simply become the person that you want to date. And I wonder if it can be the same idea with respect to friendships or relationships. Become the friend that you want to be. Become the friend that you want to have, or become the partner that you want to have, and take the qualities, define for yourself what qualities you're looking for in a friendship or in a partnership, and then simply integrate those into your own being and work toward that for yourself so that you can attract that to you in others. What do you think about that?
I agree with this being something you don't need to overcomplicate. I hope even the things said today, for the most part, seemed very simple and achievable in nature, because they are, right? This is how we were designed to be, or we were supposed to be, not necessarily designed, but supposed to be. So, remember that, right, from a humanity and a human behavior and a connection type of standpoint. So it shouldn't be all that complicated. Now, it's not missed on me when we're talking about partnerships. That feels very complicated because there's only so much you can control, and then you're dealing with, a whole other party here, right? So I get that. But yeah, I think, to kind of translate some of what you're saying about, the lesson is to show up in a way that's different than how we usually do it. Try it on for size. You can start really small. You can start really light. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be heavy. None of the examples I gave today were heavy. They weren't disclosing trauma from when you were 10. I didn't say anything like that. The other thing to translate that I heard you kind of saying was, if you want a village, you got to be a villager. Yeah, so if we want a village, we have to be a villager. So if we want that friendship to be sustained, we have to text them too. We have to call them too. We have to suggest that restaurant also, or whatever it looks like in your world. So some of that, we avoid because we think we don't want to inconvenience the other person, or, oh, if they needed me, they would come to me, or if they wanted to spend time with me, they would talk with me. There are so many people, I can guarantee you, that are desperate for them to be contacted, right? Because we just end up with two parties that both think they'll be inconveniencing the other person. So, well, nothing ever happens. Yeah, there's a need to invite things in, but that invitation should not be confused with sort of you standing still and expecting it to come into your orbit. You need to be an active participant in reaching for people, and you may have to be the one that starts the conversation in a way, or integrate it into the conversation in a way that that bond can form, the deep connections can form, so you can get that high that I talked about at the beginning after you come off of that brunch or phone call or engagement with someone, right? So yeah.
Also, one thing that comes to mind when you're talking about that is because I've got this fantastic logical brain that always wants to apply timelines to everything. Again, task list, get it done, feel good, accomplished. But this would be more like a marathon than a sprint, right? When it comes to forming relationships and trying new things, it doesn't happen overnight. So it requires a certain level of commitment from a person to want to change things, to realize that you might try one thing and it doesn't work. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means try it a different way next time, right? Where do we go for that language?
I'm actually going to disagree with a little bit in that it's not a sprint and it's not a marathon, because good news is that for some of the things I'm talking about, they are quick wins. Your brain, you are simply a byproduct of conditioning over time, right? Classic sort of Pavlov. So, for example, in your partnership, right? If you feel like you can go to that person and they don't catch you there, they don't receive you well, they're not interested in what you're saying, they're dismissive, they might minimize you, so on and so forth, right? We didn't start that way. We probably learned over time. Let me pivot, 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 make a ton of little micro and macro pivots to where this is where we've ended up now in how we speak to and open up to this person. So we need some quick wins to teach ourselves again, to retrain ourselves that we don't have to act and behave like that anymore because it's keeping us away from people and quality of life and depth of feelings, depth of self, and getting in touch with our identity, right? So just get some quick wins under your belt, and then that conditioning will start to do what it does, which is condition you, but in a different way. So we're not even sprinting. We're not even in a marathon at that point, really, because it's not taking a lot of work. This is happening automatically. The responses that you have today to your environment are automatic. They are automatic responses of your nervous system, environmentally, maybe your upbringing, your rearing, a relationship that you're currently in or were before. Maybe you had a platonic, maybe you had a girlfriend and you got burned from that relationship, or something like that. All of this is showing up today and making decisions for you so fast that you're not even aware of it and you're behaving in that automatic way. So we just need to get our reconditioning under control. And so after we start to do that and make some headway there, same thing, not a sprint, not a marathon. It's just how we show up in life.
What would a quick win look like?
A quick win would look like when I said the grocery cart example, when you're talking to your girlfriend that you wanted to kind of test out what can our relationship potentially look like, or our conversations, can we get away from superficiality, something like that. Or when I gave the example of explaining how the meeting went in two different kind of ways. Quick wins would be that we said either one of those and the sky didn't fall, the house was not on fire, you weren't made fun of, you weren't canceled, and like none of that happened.
Life goes on and everything's okay. And
Mhm.
I would imagine that in that situation, you're also feeling something a little bit different too, because you're doing something a little bit different.
Yes, you should have, needle moving positive outcomes. I mean, even if they're neutral, that's a positive outcome. But yeah, that's what a quick win would look like. So that's what I mean when I talk about sort of this reconditioning, about what we say, our comfort level saying them. I mean, if you even will reread a text a few times or think about what you sent, that's a product of conditioning. I don't know how you got there. I don't know the origin story with there, but ultimately you believe that you can't be trusted, that your self-esteem has been impacted and your sense of self and confidence, and that you say something and you think it might not be good enough, it might be misinterpreted, it might be misunderstood, it might not land right, all of that, right? So it could be showing up in your life in these kind of small ways, but you do 10 of those a day, 50 of those a day, that's no way to live.
Becomes the quick wins become your comfort zone rather than the holding back become remaining your comfort zone.
Yep, you just recreate your baseline. In other words, yes, you recreate your comfort zone. That will be your new comfort zone. And certainly this stuff does take, refinement and practice over time, and no doubt. So a little bit closer to kind of the marathon piece of it. But yeah, you would recreate it's not even that you're changing your environment really so much. It's your internal baseline has shifted.
And so the automatic negative thoughts I think that is what prevents us a lot of times from stepping into courage and trying something new, like the thoughts that are our internal defense mechanism built around our safety, meant to keep us safe, that say, oh, well, you tried that before and it didn't work, or you did that and you got hurt, or the automatic negative thoughts that say, well, that's what other people do, that's not what you do. I can see a real advantage to taking a step back and taking a third-party perspective on the language that we tell ourselves as we're trying out new language on others. What role do you think that plays in our ability to shift communication?
The language that we use is huge, and yeah, a good place to start would be the language that you use with others, so that it hopefully sort of boomerangs or sort of start to come back to you. You know, people with negative self-talk, negative thoughts, right? You know, oh, they liked, you know, my win, but they didn't see how hard it was to get there. They don't see how hard I studied to get there. They don't see that I just got lucky, or I knew someone that knew someone, or whatever we receive in life that we kind of filter through this discounted lens. Very common, right? And then the negative self-talk of like, you know, can get really harsh. I'm a loser. I'm I'm not attractive. I'm old. I'm worthless now. I'm this, right? I'm not wanted. I'm not desired. You know, people don't think X about me, right? We can get really, really mean and bully ourselves all the time. Talk about the ultimate conditioning. If that's what your inner mind is telling you, then you are literally training and teaching yourself on a day-to-day basis to believe those thoughts without a doubt. And then you go out and interact with the world around you, and it's all being filtered through that. That is your core belief system. It's really hard though to think about on your own, just changing. What do we do? We're like, oh no, don't think that. Let me replace that with a positive thought. And then it never works, at least not in like a sustainable kind of sticky way. It's like a temporary kind of thing. So I work with a lot of people that are experiencing a lot of negative self-talk and self-hate and self-loathing and things like that. And the place we'll start with that is, you know, what is the origin story? How did we get there? When do we believe the most that we are that loser or we aren't good enough? And when do we believe that the least? And so we just kind of start to figure out some of those conditions that led us to some of that thinking. And then we want to work together to dismantle it. The good news is that it's all very fixable. This is all stuff that can be achieved. You can absolutely turn that ship around. And give yourself some grace and some kindness and some nurturing. But yeah, fighting with that negative self-talk is really hard. And I know that it can feel like a very lonely battle. It's not, you know, necessarily something that you can just go to a friend and just dump on them and disclose, you know, this is how I speak to myself. It's often something that we do in incredible loneliness and incredible isolation. And then that just makes it deeper seated. So certainly if you don't have a therapist, if you're able to access a resource like that, that's a great space where you can literally say to someone, this is what I'm telling myself. These are the things I say about me.
Are you taking new clients right now? Just out of curiosity.
I am. Yeah, I am.
Well, and I know you've been kind enough to fit me into your busy afternoon, and so I want to be respectful of your time. But maybe we can circle back to the 8 pillars of intimacy in another conversation, because I know you have to go now. But where can people find you? I'll put everything in the show notes, but is there anything you want to share with the community before we sign off?
Yeah, they can find me just at my website. That has all of it, and it's just my name, brianabass.org. Briana is with one N, so Briana Bass, BASS.org, and you can contact me directly there, email me, and view the socials.
Thank you. When I was talking to my office staff about you, I was showing them your profile and I was like, look at this woman. Look at all these things she's doing. Like, this is the woman I'd want to have with me in a dark alley. And I'm totally serious. I think what you bring to this community is so beneficial, and I'm already looking forward to our next conversation. But I do just really want to say thank you for sharing your wisdom today and for being present with me and for talking through some of these really important topics with me. And I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much.